Hello, it's Glenn with War for the West, back at you again today. I want to discuss this Epstein scandal, and what I decided to do was mind map out my thoughts on it, because a lot of people are getting angry at me, making comments seeming to intimate that, like, I don't believe that what Epstein did was absolutely horrible and a crime and that he deserved to be punished. How you can come to that conclusion from my commentary, I just don't know, but maybe that's my fault. So I figured if I could clarify what I think here and why I question certain aspects of the narrative, and why I'm willing to trust Bongino and Patel and Bondi, at least you could understand me. You don't have to agree with me. And I really mean that. We can be on the same side and disagree about certain matters. I disagree based on facts. So let me show you how this works in my crazy little brain, okay? So let me actually make this smaller so we can start with a summary view of what I'm trying to go through here, okay? So what I see are three claims that people are making. Oh, we're making these bigger. Sorry, I'm juggling this the wrong way. One is that Epstein was running a global pedo operation which serves elites. The second is he's running a blackmail operation, and the third is he didn't kill himself. Those are the claims that I disagree with, right? Not that Epstein wasn't running a female prostitution operation, underage prostitution operation. It was like sugar baby style operation as well, depending on the girl, right? And so I'm really surprised that people are confused by this. So I'm just going to go through one by one what my objections are to the way this narrative is framed by somebody supposedly on my side, and we're going to go through it. So when you say he's running a global pedophilia ring, the first thing I do is say Epstein wasn't a pedophile. And all of you flip out. And apparently there's some stories around about him with younger kids. All I've seen the data on is 14 years old was the youngest. There may have been younger. I'm not a compendium of all information on the planet. I can only know what I know. But his victims were 14 years and up. And by the way, this is not, I don't know if you know how this works. I'm actually a victim of sexual abuse in my life. So I've looked at the psychology of this when I was a child, right? And what I've had to do is understand the way these people work. So I might approach this a little more clinically than you folks do. Pedophilia is a very serious thing to accuse somebody of, yes? Because it's pathological. It means inside your brain there's something different. You don't get aroused when you see a beautiful, 23-year-old girl, which like everybody on Earth, all males on Earth will find arousing. It doesn't mean they're going to go date them and marry them and try and have sex with them. I'm talking about the autonomic response. The way arousal works, folks, isn't conscious. It's a little switch in your brain that you just get aroused and you notice you're aroused later. It's automatic, right? So pedophiles get aroused by prepubescent children, like 11 and under. They get rid of the kids once they hit puberty. So people talk about this, though, like pedophiles will just take anybody. They're very picky people, pedophiles. They've got to have children who are prepubescent, and once they're, like, it's one of the horror stories of people who are victims of pedophilia. They'll often groom these young children by befriending them. They're in trusted relationships with them. They're a coach. They're known in the community. They're a family member. They get them to be secret about it. They groom them very slowly. They bring them into it, make them feel like they're loved, and then they abandon them as soon as they hit puberty because they're not turned on by them anymore. That's a pedophile. That's not Jeffrey Epstein at all. Jeffrey Epstein was a sex addict billionaire. Sex addict billionaire. Let me take a sip of coffee here. And let's get into it a little bit more. He was running an underage prostitution ring. By the way, back to the pedophilia term. There is a term for people who want to have sex with underage girls. It's called ephebophilia. It's kind of a fetishization of them, but it's not really a valid psychological diagnosis, because the truth is that once girls become sexually mature, 14, 15, they become interesting to sexually mature adults in terms of arousal, the way its brain chemistry works, Like, so the idea that you're going to say everybody who's attracted to younger women like that is sick, they're not sick in the way a pedophile is, right? What they have is a moral problem, an inability to control themselves, and an inability to channel their lust in the appropriate direction. Because a lot of guys will find occasionally some pretty 17-year-old pretty. Then it'll draw your eye to it. If you go any further, there's something bad, right? But like, that's just normal stuff. So I think a lot of people are conflating these ideas and not really thinking carefully. When you use the term pedophilia, you mean something very, very different than teenage prostitution, which girls signed up for voluntarily, which we're going to get into now. And this is where my main difference with a lot of you comes. So I got very curious about this when it first got reported, right? And I don't trust. I don't trust news sources, mainstream news sources, but I don't trust social media sources either. I laugh when people say X is the biggest news source on the planet. X is the biggest source of bullshit on the planet as well. There's no editorial control. Thinking no editorial control is a good thing in terms of finding truth is crazy, okay? So what I do is I do research looking for source documents. I went and researched, guess if you ever want to know what's really going on with any of these crimes, any of these scandals, go to the local papers for that town, city, state, and read them. Find the police reports. You will learn so much more than you will learn by listening to 1,000 morons on YouTube or X babble about this crap. This is what I did. I went and found local articles in the local newspapers. I found the actual police report. I'm going to take you through it now, but I want to summarize what that police report showed when he was arrested in 2005. He's running an underage prostitution sugar baby ring. The girls came and went as they pleased. They recruited friends. They were coming back, asking for more money on email and text. There was zero physical coercion involved, yeah? There might be, in the session with Epstein where he's maybe trying to, advance with the girls farther than they want, there may have been some physical aggression beyond what they asked for. But they knew they were going to give naked massages to a guy who was going to want to jerk off. And then when they came back, they knew exactly what they were getting into. And the girls, and they were told this ahead of time, that this was not just showing up with a massage, right? They knew what they were getting into. You see, the police report makes all this clear. And and people, it's funny, when people hear this, they're like, oh, he's blaming the victim. A child can't consent. No, of course not. Of course a 16-year-old can't legally consent to sex with an adult, right? But it's not the same as kidnapping a 7-year-old, keep them locked in your basement, and gang raping them. If you can't tell the difference, I can't help you, yeah? If you can't tell the difference between those two things, you're crazy. And when you talk about this, you conflate those two things. They are not the same. Now, if you understand this properly, you'll understand what else happens. And we're going to go read the police report in a second, right? The victims never wanted to testify. The federal prosecutor who took this case over down in Florida, Acosta, he said it plainly. He goes, the victims are being very difficult to work with. Why? I'm going to read the police report in a second, and you'll start to see why. This was a running mill of girls who referred each other and came back to make money off of him. It was all run by local girls who were who had maybe done stuff with Jeffrey and then become his sort of managers for this. Many of the victims. A bunch of the victims were not underage, by the way. They were a majority, 18 or over, and they were recruiting and setting up for the girls. Do you know what that makes them? That makes them sex traffickers. Of course the case falls apart. He doesn't want to, there's no way that that these victims want all this coming out, especially once the parents of these kids get involved now. Of course, once they're arrested and all this comes out, there's discovery, there's endless texts and emails showing them begging for more money, coming back for more money, recruiting their friends, and very little in the way of, he made me do stuff I didn't want to do. That happens sometimes, but it's portrayed to you that these girls are taken against, it's a totally different scenario, right? And the prosecutor can't prosecute the case. He's in a very tough spot in the early 2008, when this finally gets all sorted out, that non-prosecution agreement. And let me explain how that happened. So the feds have been investigating him for a sex trafficking, money laundering thing that on a much bigger scale that they wanted to get this on. And then the locals moved in and made this arrest, kind of disrupting the feds' plans, by the way. Again, you don't know any of the details here. The feds wanted to take the case over. That's why the Fed prosecutor got involved. But when the case fell apart because of the victims, they were left with the following. First of all, federal prosecutors don't like losing cases. This is a huge problem in our justice system, by the way. Their egos and their need to win and preserve their win record make them make crazy charging decisions, crazy plea deal agreements, and that's exactly what happened here. They could not look people straight in the eye and say, we didn't convict this guy of anything. But what was happening is the victims weren't going to testify because their behavior was awful. And if they testified, many of them would then become criminally culpable for sex trafficking charges. Acosta knows all this. Now, he's got some case. By the way, they've been Epstein is not a good guy. They're paying off witnesses in the background, all kinds of stuff, taking depositions, doing research in the front. Like, they're doing what anybody who had money would do in a case like this. They're finding out these girls' stories aren't true in some cases. They've been lying, all kinds of stuff. This all went on, folks. This is not in dispute now. These are facts. I'm not making crap up, okay? So, like, the case falls apart. So it's like either let him walk or go to trial with him are your two choices, or cut a deal with him. Those are the three choices. I'm sorry, there's three choices, right? Drop the case, go to trial and probably lose, because that's what the truth of it at the time. Or cut a very sweetheart deal, which is what they did with him, right? Which is ridiculous, I get it. And they also, because the victims wouldn't testify, they couldn't bring the sex trafficking case, the human trafficking case they wanted to bring, right? Okay, before we go to the police report, I just want to do a few other things. Who is Jeffrey Epstein? This has been misexplained so many freaking times, I can't stand it. He was a savant at math, okay? Jeffrey was one of those kids. I'm kind of like him in a way, in that I was very intelligent young and did a lot of reading, a lot of learning on my own, and school was not really a great fit for me. I went to 5 different colleges. I have like 100 credits and never even bothered to get an undergrad, right? And so, actually, it's because the abusive upbringing I grew up with. I had such a problem with authority. That was kind of my adaptive response to my scenario to preserve the dignity of myself. I became incredibly difficult, incredibly strident, incredibly oppositional to anybody with authority around me. And I've learned to get over that, but that, as a young man, it ruined education for me. I don't know how Jeffrey Epstein got there, but he was discovered to be a super smart guy. So he gets some friends know him because he's like, he's in like this circle of successful Jewish people. His parents are in New York, out of Brooklyn and whatnot. He managed to know somebody, get a job as an instructor at the Dalton School in New York City without having a degree, but he's teaching math and he's teaching kids. Apparently there was some scandal there. We never got the details of. There's been nothing that came out. Wouldn't be surprised if he was interested in young girls, but he's also much younger then, so different context probably. So he gets fired from there and he goes to work for Bear Stearns, right? People say, I read somebody going, there's no record. I was listening to John Cardillo, of all people. Jesus fucking Christ, John. You were a cop and a military guy. You don't know jack about Wall Street. Now you've got some money. You know a few money guys in the party. You think you know something. He literally said, I talk to people I know on Wall Street. They never heard of him. You're a moron, okay? He was involved in Wall Street in the late 70s, dipshit. Nobody around these days would know who he is. I can't stand all this. People, they come in with their opinion. Cardillo's got a big following. He's weighing authoritatively on this. It's like just another moron babbling nonsense. He's never once bothered to check. Understand, he's never done the research that I've done. So here's what you find. At Bear Stearns, he very quickly advances himself. He becomes, in fact, in a short period of time, a limited partner in 4 or 5 years, which is really fast at Bear Stearns, and is handling private clients. He is a great private client money manager. He's built for it. Why? Because he's why could he be a teacher at Dalton? Think about it. Dalton's an elite prep school where the elite send their children to turn them into elites. He exudes this kind of elite, sophisticated, intellectual air. This is his con, by the way. That's what he did his whole life. He built this whole social circle that had nothing to do with fucking young girls or his bad dealings. He was a huge philanthropy money raiser guy. He traded his ability to be seen as their peer into a huge social network and began advising private clients. He didn't really start to meet Les Wexler, the head of the guy who founded Victoria's Secret, where he got all his. This is where Epstein made most of his money managing his funds. Les Wexner, rather, is a Canadian billionaire, and that didn't happen. He didn't even meet Wexner until 87, 89, right? 87, 88, right? So he's building up his business, and he becomes a private money manager. And what he's doing is he's working with very high net worth people who are international in nature. So he's not dealing with some local guy in New York, right? And he's dealing with people who are billionaires, who have global finances. Now, we don't know many more details, but people then fill in that blank space with a lot of details they don't have, which is interesting. They just make up stories. The fact is that he was probably involved in a lot of questionable money laundering kind of operations, setting up corporate structures, moving money around, investments, things like that, across borders, not necessarily into markets, private investments, going into private groups. This is very shadowy, and there's a skill in doing that. And frankly, billionaires, I understand why very wealthy people do this, because the governments have gotten out of control with taxation now. They take so much money and there's so much regulation and they take it so many different ways. You've got to have a strategy to avoid these bastards. They'll eat up a lot of your money over the years. So what they do is, guys like Epstein, they structure ways to avoid taxes, put them in certain jurisdictions. In some ways, it may not be strictly illegal. It could be possibly legal. It would depend if the case went to court. And then all these rulings changes all the time. There's a lot of details about this that are very fine, and you have to understand, this is what Jeffrey specialized in. He coupled that with building this network of rich people to raise money for charities and to fund research projects for the world's thinkers. And he built what people would call in intellectual circles a salon, which meant he had an ongoing social life that brought in the wealthy and the brilliant, people like Eric Weinstein, for example. Bill Gates, who's both a billionaire and brilliant, in a sense that he's an innovator. People think of him that way. And then other people who, like Alan Dershowitz, is there not because he's he's wealthy. He's there because he's a brilliant legal mind. What you see is Epstein worked very hard to create this social circle of the wealthy and elite and the world's leading thinkers. And there's hundreds of that Epstein's had brought to his place and had met with and things like this. Is a constant thing he did. And so what you're asked to believe, you're asked to not know any of that and just believe everybody you talked to went there to bang girls. Not at all. He had many, many parties and gatherings and lunches and dinners which were about networking with these people, and none of these people slept with anybody, okay? He was not P. Diddy, you idiots. He was a pervert, a sex addict who wanted to have sex 3 times a day. That's what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, okay? Now, let's slow this down and let's take a look at some facts here, right? Because I think, again, we're really getting sideways here. I'm going to make myself a little smaller so this is easier. This is easier. Hang on, Glenn. Come on. Do this the right way. There you go, puppy. All right, here we are. So this is the police report that was filed about Jeffrey Epstein, and this is what it says. And I want to take some time and read some of this with you so you get an understanding of what he was doing and what he wasn't doing. From March 12, 2005 through February 2006, Palm Beach Police Department conducted a sexual battery investigation involving Jeffrey Epstein, Sarah Kellen, and Haley Robson. Sworn tape statements were taken from 5 victims and 17 witnesses concerning massages and unlawful sexual activity that took place at the residence of Jeffrey Epstein in Palm Beach. Several of the victims were recruited by and brought to the residence by Haley Robson to perform massages for Epstein, for which Robson received monetary compensation. During the visit, they would be introduced to Sarah Kellen, Epstein's assistant, who in turn would record their phone numbers and name. The victims would be brought to Epstein's bedroom to provide massage. Epstein would enter the room, order the victims to remove their clothes, and provide a massage. As the victims complied and provided massages, Epstein would rub fingers on their vaginas on occasion. He'd introduce vibrators and provided massage on 3 separate occasions. He had intercourse and penetrated the women with his fingers. He paid them $200 to $1,000 a pop. What goes on here is basically an account of these. It's long. It's 17 or it's long. I can't remember. 22 pages. I can't spend the time to read all this to you, but let me summarize it to you. What it states is this woman, Haley Robson, by the way, who was in 2005 was 19 years old. She is guilty of sex trafficking. Why wasn't she charged? Well, she claimed she was a victim too. That's interesting, right? Haley Robson, and then also Sarah Kellen. She was a 19 years old, 20 years old by this point too, and she's doing it. So these 2 girls were active accomplices in the sex trafficking. Have you ever even heard their names before? Did you know they weren't charged, and why? I don't know why. It's a very strange decision. Just as strange as Jeffrey not being charged. Because they were both victims and accomplices. You see how this went? It was very ugly. It was very gross. So I just want to go to the... Let me see. When you read these, what you see very clearly is that Robson explained to every single one of these girls who were coming over that they knew exactly what they were going to be doing when they get there. Right. And so here it goes. She was told that she would have to provide a massage to make $200. Robson thought about the offer and agreed to meet with Jeffrey. Right. Molly, unknown last name, picked up Robson. She was taken to the Epstein house. She was introduced to Sarah. Right. Look here. He tried to touch me and I stopped him. And then she performed this massage and left. She came back and did more. She knew exactly what he wanted. Epstein was not just throwing these girls on the ground and assaulting them. he had this weird game going on where he wanted them to consent. Do you understand what he was up to? He was using massage to get sexual access to girls, and then by trying to turn them on and play his games, he was trying to get them to consent to have sex with him, even though he paid for it. He's playing a very weird little game. But time after time, look right here. Robson stated that every girl she brought knew what to expect when they arrived. Yeah. So again, I'm not blaming them, but you have to understand this looks nothing like. First of all, these are all 14-year-old and older girls. Horrible, I know, but not under 11, not pedophilia, not prepubescent. This is what a prostitution ring looks like, folks. And this is what I started to discover when I started to read the Epstein, the information, is that he was basically a world-class pervert, this guy. I mean, he really had problems, okay? Psychological problems. And he was a sex addict extraordinaire. And he wanted 3 girls a day, and he had the money to do it. And so these people procured them for him and kept it going. If you go deeper into the police report, you see people like Virginia Giuffre, who you all feel so badly for, as I do too. She had a horrible life. She was a teen prostitute before coming to Jeffrey Epstein, yeah? She started at 12, okay? She gets involved. She brings in 60 more girls. She could have been charged with sex trafficking. You don't understand. You want to know why they don't want to testify? Because if they testify, they admit guilt. And even if they aren't charged, say they get not charged, because that can happen. They get a non-prosecution agreement, which is actually what happened. They got a non-prosecution agreement, right? But what they're not able to do then is claim to be just victims. I'm sorry, folks. This is much more complicated and ugly, and nobody wanted it coming out. Not the parents of the girls, not the girls, for reasons that I hope you can start to understand now. Okay, so let's see where we're at in terms of the claims. Claim 1: Epstein is running a global pedo operation. He's simply not. He is voluntarily recruiting girls that he tries to convert into full prostitutes, and a lot of them do, and they stay around. The girls who don't like it leave and don't come back. Do you understand? They're local girls. He's not shipping them in. Now, he has a house in New Mexico. He's got a house in Palm Beach. He's got a house in New York. He's got He's got the island. There's no girls on the island because it's his island. He brings girls there. But they all fly voluntarily there. If they get on the airplane, he asks them to go. In fact, that woman, what's her name again? Kelly, gosh, what is her name again? Sarah Callan, rather, right here. She basically set up the flights for them, you know? Like, so I've proven my points very clearly at this stage of the game in terms of this was not a pedo operation. This was an underage prostitution operation. Disgusting, gross stuff, but nothing like you've been told. He's not getting like illegal alien children and shipping them in or plucking them off the streets of Eastern Europe. Yeah, the guys in his network, they're looking for girls who are interested. They get him involved. Sometimes it's more international. That was incidental. It was not the design. It was not what was going on. The problem you can't get through your head, a lot of you Christians, you can't imagine how many young girls were willing to do this. This is what should shock you. Hundreds of young, normal girls living in suburban life in Florida agreed to do this. And this is what people can't face. And I'm tired of it. Because you're coming to crazy conclusions. Okay. Let's now go to the big one, which is that he's running a blackmail operation, right? He's running a blackmail operation. So what is the evidence for that? And I'll tell you right now what the evidence is. There was no evidence for this forever. There was speculation that a woman named Whitney Webb engaged in and others engaged in over the years, putting together the background of the Maxwell family and Robert Maxwell, who was absolutely involved with Israeli intelligence, because as the nation was formed, Maxwell and others were raising funds to buy weapons to fight the war and the revolution. This is not a very common thing, but this is something that more than a couple of people were involved in at the founding of Israel. This is presented to you as some deep, dark secret. It's known that Maxwell did this. He's got connections to the guy named Bronfman and Les Wexner out of Canada. And there's this whole story spun up because of like people being around each other. Suddenly they're part of an intelligence plot. The only evidence that actually exists for this being an Israeli intelligence spot is this. Ari Ben Manash is the source, and he made a comment in 1920. Imagine that. in 1920, I'm sorry, in 2020, not 1920, years and years after the whole Epstein mess has come out of the blue, he makes a comment to a guy doing an article who's just written a book, by the way, trying to promote the book, and says, oh no, yeah, they were blackmailing, yeah, it was absolutely a blackmail operation. They were basically, he was in there banging young girls, and by the way, the interviewer didn't believe him and said, really? And he, yeah, so because like they get pictures of them, screwing young girls. That's what he said. Well, the problem is this: he left Israeli intelligence in 1987. Jeffrey Epstein didn't even meet Les Wexner until 1987, right? And he doesn't mention this for decades. After he leaves the, he was a big public figure, ran Contra, all kinds of other scandals in his background. A very dodgy guy in some ways. Not necessarily a full-on liar. He's told the truth at times. But like somebody who's, by the way, what is a spy? A spy is a person who's trained to lie for a living, right? You got to get that. So I'm sorry, that's all the evidence you've got. This one guy making a statement well after the fact that he can't really show he has knowledge of, and he's provided no evidence to back it up. He's provided no other people to validate his claims, nothing, right? He's provided no assessment of what this person said or nothing, right? Just, oh yeah, this was well known, this was going on. Okay. That in a quarter will get you a cup of coffee in a court of law, by the way. It's hearsay with no backup. Okay, because he's not even claiming he saw it, right? He's just aware of it. So that's very, very weak evidence to tell me there is an intel community-backed global pedo ring that's driving a formal blackmail operation to control U.S. politicians, because that's what you all believe, right? There's no evidence to support any of that, folks. And so, if you're blackmailing all these people, what would happen is eventually one of them would come forward. You wouldn't get everyone to stay quiet. You'd find one guy would just get pissed off or they got it wrong. There's never been a single shred of any evidence of any blackmailing going on found in his emails, found in his actions, his texts, nothing. Nothing. You assume that these people are going there and diddling all these girls. I think some of his close friends are doing that, for sure. Others, no. Certainly not everybody who goes to hang out with him is doing that. And we don't have any record of him having clients who he's selling these girls to. What he's involved with is this raising money for philanthropy, raising money for deals, building his network up, monetizing it by connecting people to do deals with them. The sex is a sideshow for his perversion. Doesn't have a client list. He's not running a prostitution ring for these elites to get them to get the pedos, the kids they need. Look, and here's the thing. I'm not saying this couldn't have happened. I'm saying you don't have the evidence to make the claims as strongly as you do. You have some evidence. You have very, very weak evidence. And this is what I don't get. Here's the last thing. He didn't kill himself. And people sign off or announce themselves on their YouTube channels as, yeah, and Epstein didn't kill himself. By the way, when people are engaging in that level of bullshit, that's the moment when for me, that's always where I go dig deeper. You almost always find that people who are that identified and bought in with sloganeering on these issues, it's almost always the exact opposite of what's true, folks. You've been lied to so badly about Epstein killing himself. And it really bugs me. So this is what I'm gonna wrap up on, and hopefully this will clear some stuff up for you. So first of all, Epstein, upon learning that his bail was denied a couple of weeks earlier, had tried to kill himself in the Metropolitan Correctional Facility. This all happens in the month of the last few weeks of July and the first couple of weeks of August. That's the elapsed time for all these total events, right? Where he's in Metropolitan Correctional Facility, he's trying to get a bail hearing, etc. He kills himself when he's not going to get the first bail hearing. His attorneys get another. He gets denied bail, not for the first bail hearing. Let me be careful what I'm saying. Sometimes I get too wired up on coffee and I talk too fast. You may have noticed this. I'll really try to do better. So what happens is his lawyers press for an appeal, and they want to appeal the bail ruling, and somehow they're able to do so. In the public eye, like local prosecutors, people out of the DA's office, defense attorneys, judges, they're like, he's never going to get bail. The judge made a statement. He goes, I can't imagine any circumstances where I'd give this guy bail. And looking at the case, there's almost no case like his where he's accused of the kind of crimes he is and has a private jet and money and international residences where they'd ever give bail. Like never, ever, ever are you going to get bail when you're accused of what he's doing, and there's the amount of evidence. I mean, look, just because it isn't pedophilia doesn't mean it's like not god awful, right? And they have witnesses now, they got evidence, they got the whole fucking thing. So he's not getting bail. Yet you're told that that's not true. The night before he kills himself, he has a multi-hours long meeting with his lawyers. We're told by the lawyers that he wasn't suicidal after that conversation. He seemed fine. But what happened last time Jeffrey Epstein seemed suicidal? They put him on suicide watch so he wouldn't kill himself again, right? Made it very hard for him to kill himself. You remember that? That's what they did. He tried to kill himself. They put him on suicide watch. He seemed better, and they took him off of it. Do you think he's going to tell his lawyers, I want to kill myself and go back on suicide watch if he wants to kill himself? No. He's going to stay calm. And he's going to kill himself, which is exactly what he did. Now, you were told all kinds of confounding facts about this death that are confounding, but you should know that many murders and suicides have confounding facts. They often are not cut and dried the way you think they are when there's an investigation, right? So there's a few things you're told that I don't really understand how all this works. First off, that you can't believe that the guards went to sleep or cameras weren't working. I happen to have family in the law enforcement, and for reasons I won't get into, I know people who would keep prisoners in MCS, and I heard stories about it. I got interested and started researching it decades ago, by the way. It is considered one of the worst federal correctional facilities there is. They can't seem to get rid of the corruption. The guards are constantly getting paid off. Excuse me. Facility's a mess. There's all kinds of chicanery that goes on all the time. All kinds of problems. Again, I'm not excusing it. You just should know. That's the track record. These two guys. Now, there's many scenarios that could have happened. Here's what I think is most likely. Jeffrey Epstein had ways of moving money around. He had to, via some network or the other that he would have. Because he had to have money offshore in assets or places that couldn't be touched. Or even physical gold just stashed somewhere. Or like things like diamonds or whatever. Billionaires like this, he might have $1 zillion, but he's probably got $5 or $10 million stuck away somewhere that nobody knows about, like buried in the dirt, right? He can get money when he needs it, in other words. My guess is this. He arranged to pay off people in jail to kill him. You could pay the guards to ignore things, to leave things open, to make the cameras not work. And I believe he didn't know if he could do it, but the guys didn't want to be accused of murder, so they tried to make it look like a suicide. Now, there's as much evidence for that as there is for your global pedophile conspiracy. I'm just speculating based on circumstantial evidence. There's another level of this that you haven't considered. Jeffrey Epstein was abusing girls, underage girls. And forget the sort of mythology you talk about prison. Prison justice isn't always enforced. They don't always go after guys, go after young girls like this, right? Not pedophiles, but like, basically underage prostitution, statutory rape, but they do sometimes. It's possible this was prison justice as well, and the guards go along with it sometimes, Now, is it possible that Hillary Clinton played somebody off or other people, famous people? Yes, but there is absolutely no evidence that happened. So here's the lies you've been told. You've been told that, here's what things they do to confound my version of events. They say, no, you're wrong, Glenn. He had really thought he had a good chance. And his lawyers have made some statements that if you want to look at them a certain way, could look like that, but they could also look very neutral. And you look at what the rest of the legal community would say. I can show you articles on it if you want. No way he's getting bail. The idea is going to go back. And then, of course, rich people do this. They waste their money on legal fees going after things. Diddy did the same thing. He couldn't get bail, right? So, you're told that, oh, no, he wasn't depressed. So here's what you're told to ignore. The pattern of his real behavior in the real world. Found out he wasn't going to get bail and be in jail for the rest of life. Tried to kill himself. Got on suicide watch. Found out, again, he didn't have a good chance of his case working out. Probably after that multi-hour conversation with his lawyers. Hides the fact that he's suicidal so he doesn't get put on suicide watch so he can kill himself. That all adds up to me much more logically than any story you've got. Now, you get to the medical examiner, that explains everything, because they try to make it look, the prisoners make it look like a suicide because they don't want to go to jail. He doesn't have the balls to kill himself. He probably found that out in his first attempt, right? That's probably what happened to him. I shouldn't say balls. Many people make attempts and fail, and they panic in the middle and they stop. Right? I shouldn't say balls. I don't think you're brave if you kill yourself. I shouldn't put it that way. Yeah? So maybe he already knew. I'm not saying this happened. I'm saying there are very plausible explanations that have as much evidence or more that don't include Hillary Clinton sending a killer in, or the deep state, or the pedo ring hits, okay? All right. I hope this makes some sense to you. I am not crazy. I am not forgiving or in any way trying to apologize or make acceptable what Epstein did. He was a monster. I'm just trying to explain why I don't buy into the three things that you believe. That there's a global pedo ring out there that Jeffrey Epstein was involved with. There may be a global pedo ring. Jeffrey Epstein had nothing to do with it. Right? The idea that he was running a blackmail operation has no data to support it either. Very, very weak evidence to support that. And that he killed himself, didn't kill himself. I mean, I'm kind of with you on the medical examiner there. I didn't talk about it. So what happened is the medical examiner said suicide. The family hired a private medical examiner, reviewed the autopsy, and then came back and said, no, this doesn't look like suicide. The way the bone broke is very unusual for somebody trying to hang themselves. It doesn't really go this way. By the way, it could go that way. It's not impossible. And even that expert came in and said it was possible. And by the way, all he does is testify at trials. You should know there's a whole bunch of experts out there. I don't want to say they give you the advice that you pay them for, but there's a lot of judgment that goes into these advice, and there's some areas that you could go either way on in judgments, and I think that's what happened here. So it's not as strong a certainty that he didn't kill himself from the medical examiner standpoint. And then the chief ME comes in and puts a rest and says, no, this was a suicide. Now, I actually can buy either explanation, a suicide or not a suicide, based on what I explained. You people think that's also conclusive. It doesn't look that way to me. I have not turned on you guys. I am trying to use evidence and stay calm. I'm very, very opposed to conspiracy theories, and I do this with each one. And unfortunately, most of the time, the facts aren't there to support the conspiracy theory, folks. Glenn, with War for the West, folks, I love you. I'm a huge supporter, but I'm the kind of guy who's going to look for the facts and evidence, reason, and be hard-bitten about it. Hopefully, that's why you follow me. Thanks. Glenn with War for the West, out.